everyone, it's Melanie and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to share with you 10 tips every quilter must know. Must know tips. Like I'm going to be sharing with you some amazing things. You better listen up. Alright, but seriously though, the first tip that I always share, if you've been following me for any amount of time, I should not even need to tell you this because you already know this, but it is change your needle. Change your needle. I can tell you how many sewing machine problems are solved by putting in a new needle because when the needle gets dull, it just doesn't pierce through your fabric very well. It causes all sorts of tension problems. It's just a big mess. So every new project, or if you're doing a really big project, maybe halfway through that project, put a new needle in and it will save you a world of trouble. Speaking of needles, people always ask me what the needle size is that they should use, and if you're quilting, you're piecing your quilt top, I recommend an 80-12 needle. That's the standard size that I recommend for piecing your quilt, but you can use a 90-14 as well. I have used a 90-14 needle forever. I've never had any trouble with it. So those are the two sizes that I recommend for doing your quilt top, and really if you're going to be doing machine quilting. So if you're a quilter that's doing machine quilting, same kind of thing. The same needle sizes are great for that as well. I do recommend whatever thread that you're choosing to use, just double check the manufacturer's recommendations for the needle size because there are some different ways that you can go, whether you're going to use cotton or polyester thread. So just make sure that your needle matches up with your thread. Now speaking of thread, I like to use 50 weight RFL thread for my piecing. 40 weight is okay as well. As long as the thread says that it's appropriate for piecing, you're good to go. So I'm not super picky. There's lots of great manufacturers. I do use RFL. Superior Threads makes a great one. But you want a high quality, low lint thread. So whatever you choose, just make sure that it's high quality and you're good to go. Now let's talk about pre-washing. So my thing is I do not pre-wash on any of my quilt projects unless I am using like a real bright saturated red and a white. In that case, I would maybe pre-wash those fabrics. Or if I don't know where my fabric came from, I'm not sure the manufacturer, I'm not sure if it's a high quality kind of fabric or not, I'll pre-wash that as well. A lot of people disagree with that though, and it's okay to be in the pre-wash camp. Totally fine. So if you are in the pre-wash camp, pre-wash and iron your fabric before you start cutting, and you want to allow for a little bit extra yardage if you are a pre-washer, just to make sure if there is any kind of shrinkage or things that happen in the wash that you've allowed for that. We do not, however, pre-wash pre-cuts, okay? So when you have those pre-cuts, the jelly rolls, the charm packs, the layer cakes, we do not pre-wash those. They will be a giant mess if you try to pre-wash those. They'll shred and they'll just be a big disaster. Those are made by high quality fabric manufacturers, and the fabric, I've never once had any of that fabric bleed or have anything crazy happen with it. So those are not meant to be pre-washed. When you are cutting your pre-cuts though, some of them come with a pinked edge, which is that little zigzag kind of like pre-cut pinked edge, right? So you want to cut the pre-cut from the outside of that zigzag, not from the inside. So include the zigzaggy piece in your cut. Okay, so that's just a little tip. Sometimes people are a little confused by that. So just make sure you include that pinked part and just put that right into your seam allowance. Speaking of seam allowance, use a scant 1/4 inch seam whenever you are quilting. Now, the reason why I say scant 1/4 inch, and some people just say, oh, well, it doesn't matter whether your 1/4 inch is large or small as long as yours is consistent. And while that is true, you might not be so much the case if you are following a pattern. So there are some times when you're following a pattern and you need your block to be a certain size that if you're using a large 1/4 inch, your block will not be the right size. So while it is good to keep your seam consistent throughout your entire project, you want to use a scant 1/4 inch and just get in the habit of doing that on all of your quilting projects. And what that means is basically a few threads smaller than your 1/4 inch. So if you're using a 1/4 inch piecing foot, which I recommend that you do if you have access to one, just kind of scoot your fabric over just a couple of threads as you're doing your sewing to make sure that it's a scant or a slightly smaller 1/4 inch. It's just one of those things, it makes everything turn out better. Now when you are cutting your fabric, I should have maybe mentioned this before, but anyway, when you're cutting your fabric, make sure you're using a fresh blade every once in a while and always have like a 90-degree angle, okay? So whenever you're doing your cutting yardage, you're cutting anything, you want to have a line on your ruler going this way and a line going this way. And you want to make sure it's a perfect 90-degree angle. That's going to help make sure you don't have a V shape when you would like look at your fabric after you've cut it. So a 90-degree angle, just remember that. And also include the line on your rulers. When you're cutting with your ruler, there's these little lines, and you want to include that line before you cut. If that line is on the outside of your cut every time you go to do that, then over the course of the entire quilt you could have some discrepancy. So you always include the line when you are cutting. Now here are my last 2 tips for the 10 tips every quilter should know. It's to maintain your machine. So clean it out, delint your machine, oil your machine if your machine requires that, and have it serviced every 2 years or so, depending on how much you use it. If you use it much more sparingly, maybe you could go a little longer, but it's good to have it regularly maintained. It will just save you a world of trouble, and you can find local sewing and back shops that will do it for a really reasonable price. So don't skimp on that, because it could really save you a lot of time and headaches in the future. So make sure your machine is cleaned and ready for sewing. My last tip is do your best. Nobody's perfect. Your first quilt will not be perfect. Every quilt will probably have some sort of a mistake in it. So don't obsess over these errors. I rarely pick anything out. It's part of the learning process, and you just take it all in and keep moving forward. No one will notice your mistakes but you, and even after a while you will forget what they are. When you're using and loving your quilt projects, don't let your perfectionism get you stuck from moving forward and finishing your quilt. Okay, so that's something I really always tell people. It's best, I will teach you my basic tips and tricks for everything. I'll teach you how to do it all, but enjoy the process and have fun with it, and keep moving. You know, baby steps. Your first couple quilts are not gonna be perfect. They're just not. I'm telling you right now. Even my quilts these days, I notice little mistakes here and there, and you know what? I could rip it out and make it perfect, but that would be frustrating and it would be no fun. So I just keep moving on, and I hope that you do the same. Thank you so much for watching my 10 tips every quilter should know. This little video has been brought to you by my premium course site, melaniesmakers.com. So give that site a visit and let me know what you think. And if you like this video, give me a thumbs up, subscribe down below, leave me a comment letting me know if I left anything out. If there's any tips or tricks that you think need to be included in this list, share below so we can all learn and have a fun time kind of communicating down there. Thank you so much for watching. See you in the next video. Bye.